Hey folks, and welcome to another episode of Let's Talk Disc Golf here on the channel. First off, I want to say that I'm sorry I wasn't able to get any content out last week, but there was a combination of me being out of town for several days for a wedding, and then getting ill and being on antibiotics and feeling like doo-doo for a week, and so basically I was out of commission to do really anything throughout the last week or so, and so that's why I wasn't able to put an episode out to talk about the Las Vegas Challenge and all the other stuff that's going on out in the news, as well as just go out and play and put some content out there. I even had to step out of a tournament I was competing in that I was going to film for the channel and stuff like that as well due to illness. And so it's just been kind of a mess here lately. But without further ado, I wanted to get back to the content here on the channel and get back to the Let's Talk Disc Golf series. And this time around, of course, we're going to be talking about Waco, which is our second event of the Pro Tour this year, our second Elite Series event. And yeah, it was a ton of fun for both divisions. Got to learn a lot, I think, about both fields. And so without further ado, let's hop into it. So starting with MPO, on the first round, the hot score of the day was going to be Adam Hammis, who actually shot a bogey-free 12 down. This was one of the best rounds of the entire tournament. He obviously tore it up, and he made himself a front runner pretty quickly. Now, 10 under par wound up being kind of the ticket to being at least on the chase card. So double digits was definitely kind of where he needed to be at after the opening round. And, of course, Calvin Heimberg was right up there in the mix, and you had Nico LaCastro, James Proctor, and several others tied for third at 10 under par, some of which would stick around throughout the course of the weekend, and a few would kind of fall off the mark, however. Also, you had several players who were still certainly at the mix at 9 and 8 under par, as you'll see later. Some of these people will become really big players later on. And so it was, all in all, a pretty tight spread from top to bottom. Just double digits again got you at least on chase card, and after that, I mean, everyone was really still kind of in the mix. As long as you were kind of in that 7 to 8 down range, there was still certainly a chance on moving day to make something happen. Then on moving day, you had Adam Hammis actually wound up with a one-stroke lead going into the finals. He wasn't the hot round of the day, but he certainly still shot really well. Just had that one bogey on hole 9. Still shot a really good round. James Proctor and Calvin Heimberg wind up doing what they need to do to put themselves on lead card. And Matty O, actually shoots the hot round of the day at 10 under par. Just had a really big streak of birdies kind of in the middle of the course, and then finished strong, going 3 birdies through the final 5 holes. And that really kind of put him in contention as well. But you had Nate Sexton, Paul McBeth, Cole Redolin, Kyle Klein, all within a couple of strokes of the leader. And even, your folks like Kevin Jones, James Conrad, Kayla Viska, still only 3 strokes off the lead. And you had several that were just 4 strokes off the lead, including Gannon Burr, who was certainly one that you can expect to, always have a shot at doing something big. And so definitely it was still a pretty tight field going into the finale. Now, the way that I would kind of wind up playing out is on the lead card, you had Adam Hammis actually have a bit of a slow start, just kind of hit a streak of pars here, wasn't really putting a whole lot of birdies on the board, but then he wound up getting a couple of birdies and then an ace to basically finish off his front 9, and that really kind of catapulted him back into the conversation of having a chance to win the title. Also had that turkey to open up the back 9, and really was on a tear there for quite a bit. Cole Redolin also was looking like he could potentially make a move for the win, but basically a double bogey on hole 15 is kind of what put him out of it. Outside of that, he birdied out, though, to still only just be 3 strokes off the lead and wound up still taking the podium finish. So really strong finish here for Cole Redolin. Definitely got to give him credit there. Cleaned up a couple of hiccups. All of a sudden, he's certainly in the mix. Now, Calvin Heimberg was also very much in the mix up until he took a double on hole 12. That seemed to be what really kind of took him out of the conversation. He did get a couple of birdies here to kind of get back into it, but missed the birdie on 17. Didn't have a chance to birdie 18, so that pretty much pulled him out of it as well. Kevin Jones had a hot start, but then kind of cooled off after a bogey on hole 9 and just wasn't getting the birdies here, kind of on that open stretch right after you come out of the woods. So that kind of made him fall off as well. And then Matty O and Nate Sexton were also kind of in the mix, but Sexton just kind of cooled off, right? Like, he went 4 down through 6, but then just wasn't really able to keep it going throughout the rest of the course, wound up finishing with a bogey even. And then Matty O actually goes 6 down through the first 7 holes and looks like he's going to be in contention, even opens up the back nine pretty strong, going 3 for 4. But what really killed him was going out of bounds on hole 15, so he winds up taking a bogey on that. And then on 16, he actually had a birdie putt, winds up missing it, has a long comebacker for par, misses that as well, and then winds up bogeying the hole. And that pretty much takes him out of it. Kind of stinks because I feel like Matty O is always in the mix. He's always a really consistent contender. He's always somewhere in that top 10 and often even very much in the top 5, but just has not been able to put together that final round to get a W. I mean, he had the hot round of the day, the second round, or at least one of the hot rounds. I'm not sure if someone maybe tied him for the hot round of the day on round 2. No, he had it solo outright. A couple of guys were close, 1 stroke behind. But yeah, it's just one of those things, man, where it just seems like he's always so close, but just doesn't quite get it. But in the end, it really did just come down to Adam Hammes versus Kyle Klein for the win. And it really was just when Adam Hammes is unable to get those final 2 birdies, doesn't allow him to force the playoff. Kyle Klein, in the meantime, shoots a clean 13 down. That is the hottest round of the whole weekend, I believe. And a big win for Kyle Klein because, Kyle, I think this is only his second Pro Tour win, if I'm not mistaken. His first one being Idlewild back in 2021, where he won that playoff against Andrew Marweed. Of course, he was like kind of a young up-and-comer because I know he won like the Next Generation tournament in 2019 and also won US AMs in 2019. And he's had a couple of like A-tier wins, and he's always been kind of ranked in or near the top 10. He had a slew of top 10 finishes actually last year, but just doesn't really have like the big wins next to his name, right? He's kind of one of those guys that just had never really broke out to get that win, something that Matty O is kind of struggling to do still, or something that Adam Hammes struggled to do for a while until he won the MVP Open. And you can kind of go down the list. There's plenty of players who have been on the brink but just haven't quite been able to get the big W at an Elite Series or higher event. But Kyle Klein able to do it this time. I think it's awesome to see him do it early in the season too, because I feel like Kyle Klein is often very underrated. I think the big thing for Klein is with the departure of Simon Lizotte from Discmania, and with Eagle McMahon kind of being in recovery mode from injury last year and still kind of finding his way without the forehand, Kyle Klein kind of can become the face of Discmania until they make another signing of some sort, either if they wind up getting Gannon Burr after that whole lawsuit situation settles, since that's been the rumor, or if they pick up someone big during the offseason before 2024, maybe then that could become the new marquee player. But for right now, it could be Kyle Klein. If he can keep up like big performances, even if he's not winning all the time, if he can at least kind of consistently be in that top 5 picture, until Eagle can start getting back on track, Kyle really does kind of become the face of Discmania right now. So it'll be interesting to see if he can keep that up. Also, great result for Adam Hammes. He was definitely in the mix for a very long time. He played really consistent golf all weekend, so you got to tip your hat to him. Again, Cole Redolin, a guy who struggled quite a lot last year, seeing him come out and get a podium finish is pretty awesome. He's definitely a guy who has a ton of talent. He just signed with DGA, so he's with a new sponsor this year. He throws really far. That's kind of one of the big things. I think putting was like his big struggle last year, but it seems like maybe he's kind of figuring that out. Calvin Heimberg, obviously had the win at Las Vegas Challenge, gets a podium finish here. We all know it at this point. Calvin Heimberg seems to be a guy that is always going to be probably somewhere in or near the top 5, and he'll probably be that way all year. I personally think, the most consistent player on tour. He just seems like he never really has events where he completely blows up. He almost always seems like he's in contention at some point in the tournament. That's over-exaggerating a little bit. I mean, I'm sure there's an event here or there where he's not doing so hot, but Calvin's just Mr. Consistent, man. I'll always kind of see him up there. And then, cool to see Kevin Jones be able to have another big event after Las Vegas. I know sometimes he can have like hot starts of the year and kind of fade off as the year progresses, but Kevin Jones having a little bit of staying power here by getting himself a top 5 finish. Then the rest of the top 10, you got Conrad. That's a good finish for him. I know he kind of struggled last year after winning Worlds the year prior. Then, Kale making a big name for himself here. I know he's kind of playing some Masters events now because he qualifies for MP40, but still occasionally playing some MPO events on the tour and had a good finish here. Matty O, again, very much was in contention for the title for a lot of the tournament after he shot the hot round the second day, but just kind of fell off a bit here at the end with these couple of bogeys, but still winds up with a top 10 finish, tied for 7th with Kale. Sexton keeps the cash streak alive, gets himself another top 10, and then the top 10 kind of finishes off with Joel Freeman, Bradley Williams, and James Proctor all kind of tying up. And it kind of goes down there from that point forward. I mean, Macbeth winds up getting 13th. Mason Ford gets a pretty good finish, being the local Texan with mint disc. Zach Melton, got to give him a shout out, coming in at 16th. That's pretty solid. Not bad for Nico either, considering, he's kind of just coming back into playing the Pro Tour consistently after the suspension. Then, you got Clemens and Humphreys. I mean, Dickerson placed a little bit lower than I would have expected, but still admirable to be in the top 25. Same with Silas Schultz. Shout out to him for being able to make it to the top 25. Same with Jake Mon. Gannon Burr kind of sticks around the top 5 as well. Just had like a really bad final round, and that kind of is what killed him from being able to kind of contend for a top 10 spot. I know Brody was on chase card actually second round and then just kind of fizzled out, but still winds up with the top 30 finish, just to kind of name some other names. But I think the big one is Eagle McMahon only placing 35th. This is definitely something to keep an eye on going forward. He had a pretty decent final round to shoot 8 under par, but certainly struggled throughout the rest of the event. And we got to kind of keep an eye on that. Do want to shout out Eric Oakley. He also had a really good round the first day. I think he was also on chase card for moving day, but had a really big struggle on moving day, but kind of finished strong with 6 under, at least to kind of keep himself somewhere, kind of in the top 35. Hopefully we can see him do more and more as time goes on. And that was kind of the big ones that kind of really leapt out to me as far as MPO goes. And so with that said, let's kind of take a little bit of a look at FPO. So in FPO, we had Kristen Tatar shoot the hot round of the day, and I believe this was the course record for FPO, if I'm not mistaken, and it wound up being 1022 rated. I know there was a lot of question about Kristen because she had that whole elbow injury. I believe it was a pinched nerve, and she had to have surgery during the offseason. And I believe, she wasn't really playing much at all during the offseason because of that surgery and recovery process. I think the surgery took place about 3.5 months ago based on some interviews I had heard. I don't think she was playing very much, prior to coming to this event, except for maybe some putting and some light throwing. And even now, I believe she was saying that she was not like throwing 100%. She was trying to tone down a bit to kind of, make sure that she was kind of easing back into everything after this whole elbow injury recovery process. I mean, we hadn't seen her since the Pro Tour Championship last year. She didn't play any tune-up events. She didn't play any local events in Estonia. She obviously wasn't at All-Stars or at Las Vegas. So I think there were a lot of question marks around what Kristen Tatar is going to be able to do at this tournament due to everything. That, and she had crazy expectations to live up to because last year she won 6 Elite Series or higher events, if you're including the Pro Tour Championship, one of those being the World Championship, and she never finished off the podium at an Elite Series or higher event. So the fact that she was 3rd place or better at every Elite Series or better event last year is a pretty incredible streak. She wound up cashing over $103,000. That's another record she had on top of, finally winning a world championship and all the other accolades she collected last year. I mean, she was just such a crazy player of the year story, really. And so to try to live up to those expectations and be able to have a similar season this season is definitely a tall order. But she comes out this first round and she looks really dang good shooting that 9 under. And, just had that one bogey on hole 11, played super good golf all day long and, breaking the course record and all that. I mean, that was certainly a bold opening statement for her, her initial event of the year coming off injury with all the question marks and expectations surrounding her. Certainly lived up to it with the 9 under. Ella Hansen continues to be someone to keep an eye on in FPO. I think this is like her 3rd year now playing on the tour, if I'm not mistaken. This might only be her 2nd year full-time touring, though. I think maybe the first year she was like limited tour. But incredible talent. One of the furthest throwers in the division. Can throw backhand and forehand. And it just seems like once she can like kind of shape out some of the mental game and some of the, like fine-tuned putting, I think she's going to be a force to be reckoned with. And she was certainly one to be reckoned with this whole tournament, which we'll talk about more and more as we get through the rounds. But strong opening round to get on the lead card, 7 under, really hot start with the 5 birdies in a row to kick things off, and played pretty clean golf. Only just had a couple of bogeys, so played really well, over 1,000 rated. Then you had Deanne Carey and Haley King kind of coming in there and tying up for the podium. Then you got Sai Ananda, who just now is kind of doing more of a full-time tour for the first time ever. You would kind of see her randomly around events here and there over the last couple of years where she would finish really big at like a big tournament, but then you wouldn't really see her playing too much after that. So she was kind of, I don't know how to explain it, like kind of just like a quiet assassin where you wouldn't see her for a while, then she'd show up for a big event, like place in the top 10, be in contention at times for, maybe even a podium finish. I know she didn't have the best start at Las Vegas, but coming out here and getting, the tie for 5th after the opening day was pretty good. Then you had Anniken Steen. Sorry, can't pronounce this very well, but I know that she was like kind of a player people were kind of keeping their eye on. And then, a lot of other regulars were kind of filling out kind of this top 11, the top 15 spot. Certainly a lot of names you'd recognize. But then round 2 rolls around, and Ella winds up taking the solo lead, shooting 3 under par. You have Kristen drop down the second, shoot an even par. So after a crazy hot 9 under, she winds up really struggling the next day. Bogeyed the first hole, took a triple on hole 6, took another triple on hole 12, and, just could not really get into a groove at all on moving day, but still does well enough to stay on the lead card and only 1 stroke behind the leader, so still in contention. Owen winds up shooting one of the hot rounds of the day, not the hottest round of the day. I think that was actually Sarah Hokum at 6 under that did that. But shoots herself onto the lead card. Again, Owen Scoggins is someone you always have to worry about. It's actually crazy how good she is in FPO, considering that she's also eligible for FP40. And the fact that she probably has some of the least distance in the division, but she is capable of throwing both backhand and forehand, and her putting is perhaps the best in the division, or certainly one of the best in the division. And that really kind of helps her kind of just play around that, just playing clean, playing accurate, knowing what her limits are, being ferocious on the putting green. She jumps up there. Also cool to see Deanne Carey, play really well and get on the final lead card. I know she just made the move with AJ Carey to Lone Star Disc, and always a very clean player. So cool to see her. Paige Shue, obviously, making kind of her comeback after not touring for a long time due to, having a child and focusing on family. She makes kind of a comeback this year, kind of touring more than she ever has in several years, but doing so with a new sponsor with Discraft. And, she winds up in the top 5 after 2 days. And then you kind of look through the rest of the top 10. And again, you see a lot of familiar faces here. But one thing you also notice is just a big slip of Paige Pierce dropping down to tied for 19, shooting 2 over par. Wound up now at even par for the tournament. And just not really having the best debut, which I think there are a lot of question marks around Paige. Because, for the first time, she's not coming into the year as the favorite or as the one that everyone expects to do well, like as the GOAT, so to speak. Kristen Tatar now kind of holds that after the crazy year that she had last year. And I think a lot of people are kind of wondering, well, can Paige get back into shape? Can Paige get back to being in the GOAT argument for FPO? Because, again, I feel like in interviews has kind of given mixed messages at times. Like sometimes she'll say that, no, doesn't consider herself the GOAT because she still needs to win one more world title to be that, because she's still tied with a couple of other players who have the same amount of world titles as her. That she still wants to, go after the major record. Most majors is that any player has won. And she was like, even had this little kind of side bet with Paul Macbeth on who would do it first, beating Ken Climo for most majors. And so there's times where she sounds like she's super motivated to prove that she is the best, to prove that she is the greatest of all time, to get that next world title, to chase after that major record. But then you see other interviews where she's kind of more laid back and just kind of wanting to have fun and just kind of wanting to enjoy the moment and be happy and be content and, enjoy herself out on the course and, do what she's passionate about and not try to, stress too much about performance or results. And I get it. Like, I respect her for that, but it is just kind of odd how sometimes it feels like she has that killer instinct and sometimes she doesn't. And there's nothing necessarily wrong with that. I mean, at the end of the day, you have to do what's best for you. You have to do what makes you happy. You have to do what makes you feel fulfilled. But I just wonder, if, Paige is going to eventually find that killer instinct again and like really want to try to gun for a big result. Maybe it's going to take a big tournament to do it, like the first major of the year, or maybe next time Worlds rolls around, maybe she finds that extra bit of motivation to put in more work and to focus up more. I don't know. I don't know what it is. But either way, this was certainly a bit of a struggle for her when you kind of consider that she's usually one of the names that's always going to be in the mix. And Katrina Allen also, too, by the end of the second day, was kind of out of the picture as far as winning the event after, winning the Las Vegas Challenge. She was certainly just kind of fighting now to try to maybe get into the top 5 or at least top 10. And so that's kind of how that went. So then we get to the finale. And when you're looking at it, it's looking like Ella might run away with it. Because remember, after the second round, she had a 1-stroke lead, and she winds up getting 4 birdies in a row the first 4 holes, while meanwhile Kristen takes a bogey on hole 2. And it's starting to look a lot like Ella's like really going to take a charge. But then she kind of cools off a little bit in the middle of the course. Kristen hits 5 in a row. And all of a sudden, she's right back in it. They're kind of squared up at one point here, kind of after hole 10. I mean, they are neck and neck at that point. And then you have Kristen take the double on 13, which was kind of crazy to see that happen. But she winds up taking that double. She fails to scramble, struggles on the putting green. And then all of a sudden, now Ella is back in the driver's seat. She's the one on top. She has the chance to close. Now, they both par out the next couple of holes, and then it comes down to just these final 3 holes. And what you wind up seeing is Ella going out of bounds 3 holes in a row. Goes OB on 16, which is kind of crazy considering how that hole is shaped. It just doesn't feel like you see people go OB on that hole too often. Don't know if the pressure got to her or what it is, but winds up struggling with that. Bogeys the hole. Kristen takes a birdie. All of a sudden, it's back to anyone's game. You see Kristen par 17, actually missed a birdie putt, but Ella again goes out of bounds and winds up taking a bogey. And so now you go into the final hole, and it's a situation where Kristen actually decides to just play the layup on, the tee side of the water, just playing for 3 at most, or potentially just getting the par if her approach shot goes awry. Ella elects to still cross the water off the tee, and there's really 2 kind of philosophies on going over the water off the tee. The one philosophy is you can try to attack the pin, where in the FPO division, you're attacking for eagle. But there's something that you can also do where you can kind of just play not straight at the pin, but more to the right side, crossing the water, which still just kind of sets you up for a layup on your second shot, similar to if you just played the kind of like righty backhand hyzer off the tee that stays on the tee side of the water. You kind of saw Nate Sexton doing this with the forehand and MPO, where he would forehand over the water, but just kind of play it safe to the right and then still just pitch up. It was just a different way of laying up, so to speak, where you just go ahead and cross the water off the tee still instead of crossing the water on the approach shot. Either way, I think Ella was probably hoping to attack the pin, and even if it didn't give her an eagle putt, she would still be across the water with an approach shot to at least grab birdie and still ultimately win the tournament, or at worst be in a playoff if Kristen gets the birdie. But she winds up pulling it way right, goes out of bounds. Now, even after that, she has the ability to, throw an approach shot to get up to the green and still be able to get par, which still theoretically could have put this into a playoff, depending on Kristen. Which that's exactly what would have happened, really, is, it would have gone to a playoff. But she winds up missing the circle 2 putt, and now she's getting bogey, and so now Kristen knows that she can, she has 2 options. You either lay up and play the playoff, or you go for the birdie putt. If you sink it, you win. And that's what Kristen Tatar winds up doing. She winds up figuring that out, that's a situation ahead of her, and she winds up hitting the birdie You kind of see her changing putters up for a moment there, like whether she's considering laying up or not, or whether maybe she's considering a putter that's a little bit stronger in the wind because she putts with the pure normally, which isn't the best putter in the wind. And yeah, she winds up settling into her normal putter, sinks it, clutch, and then winds up winning the tournament. I know there's been some controversy about, well, not controversy necessarily, but like these debates going on about whether Ella did the right thing on hole 18. First and foremost, I think going OB on 16 is what really killed her. I mean, that's just really tough. And then to follow that up by going OB again on 17 and going bogey, I think that was more of the problem on why Ella doesn't close the event. Because Kristen was not playing her best golf. We know that. She had a great first round, but she didn't play the best in the second round. And even this round, she was kind of behind the curve until Ella, finished bogey. But as far as whether Ella made the right call or not, I mean, first off, she was going for the same place she had been going for all week, which was to go over the tee, go over the water off the tee, which I think makes sense for her power and for the win that they had. That's like one of the advantages that she has. You might as well flex it. And here's the thing. Again, if you don't get next to the pin, you can still approach and get the birdie in the FPO division with it being a par 4. And if anything, I think the approach shot is probably a little bit less scary if you cross the water off the tee, because if you play the safe chip shot off the tee and you cross the water on your second shot, if you play it short, you might go on the water and go out of bounds. If you play it long, deep of the pin, you have a death putt for birdie, which means you might lay up for par or something like that in the FPO division. And so I'm thinking, you cross the water off the tee, the approach feels a little bit better because you can kind of play more straight at the pin. And as long as you play something that doesn't move too much laterally, you hopefully won't have a death putt for your next putt, as long as you give it enough power and you don't underdo it, which is kind of what Sexton did and what Ella winds up doing here as well. Is just not, throwing it far enough as far as approaches go. And so I can't really fault the play. I think she did what she felt most comfortable with. And I think that, again, she still had a chance to at least get a playoff out of it even after going OB off the tee. But then she just didn't throw a good approach shot, left herself with a really tough circle 2 putt and couldn't grab it. But I mean, the bottom line is that Ella is eventually going to win a tournament. She will win one this year. There's no doubt about it. She's just too good. She's just such a good thrower of the disc. And I think going through this situation is going to help her kind of eventually build up that grit and kind of, build up that mental game. I mean, the best way to build your mental game when it comes to handling pressure and dealing with it and figuring it out is being put in those situations over and over and over again until you kind of eventually get comfortable with it and kind of find ways to fight the nerves and, just grab your composure. And so she's only going to get more opportunities as the year goes on. And I think that there's definitely more courses out there, in particular out in the Open, where she's going to have even more of an edge than what she did at Waco. And I feel like a win's definitely coming for Ella. There's no doubt about it. Now to finish things off, Own, I mean, just as consistent as ever, it feels like. She's like the Calvin Heimberg of FPO, where she's just always in the mix, man. She's just always kind of in that top 3 or top 5, seems to always at least have a chance to win. Just such a crafty player, plays within her own game and her limitations and still finds ways to really finish strong. And I just have so much respect for that. Holcomb winds up getting in the top 5 with Haley King. We have Anna Steen, who was able to find a top 5 finish as well, tying up with Haley and Deanne Carey. You got Kat Merch and Paige Shu kind of rounding out your top 10 with Katrina Allen. And then some other names, Macy Vela Diaz is a name to keep an eye on, I think, throughout the year. I think she'll continue to kind of push for top 10 finishes and eventually maybe even find a top 5 or a podium. Obviously, we didn't have Valerie Mandahano. She's still out with injury. Situation kind of with Panis as well, though it's not like an injury. It's like a medical issue with her thyroid, and I wish her the best with that because that could be so many things. And I don't want to get into the nitty-gritty because, it's none of my business. I don't know what's going on, but just wish her the best. So obviously those were kind of 2 things that were missing from this. But other than that, a lot of familiar faces kind of filling out the rest of your top 15. Again, kind of tough to see Paige finish this low, tied for 16th. You'd expect to see her kind of at least in the top 10, if not top 5. So definitely not the best debut, but their season's still early. Still a chance to do more. Just like I expect Missy Gannon and Holland Handley will be kind of knocking on the top 10 more often than not throughout the rest of the year. I think Maria Oliva is a name that we should keep an eye on as well. I think that she could still definitely challenge. She's got the talent for sure. She also throws quite far. She also has a good backhand and forehand, and her putting's pretty decent. So I think that that's a name that we could see contend, I think, later in the year. Sayananda dropped off after the first round, but again, I think that's a name that you got to always kind of keep an eye on that could contend. And other than that, yeah, it's kind of the names kind of just fell out from there. I want to see a Stacey Hoskin eventually start challenging more too, because she's, still quite young. I know she had like a Silver Series win last year at Tallahassee, and she's kind of just getting started. I think Stacey Ronsley has a ton of talent. I thought she was kind of in the mix in Vegas. I think she was like even on coverage for a round or something like that. So definitely has the throwing talent as well. So those are some names that I'm kind of keeping my eye on. But that pretty much wraps it up as far as Waco is concerned. The only other real thing to kind of think about was the fact that we don't know what's going on with Ricky Wysocki, right? He still is having the wrist issue that is apparently Lyme related, something that he's been dealing with, Lyme flare-ups ever since he caught that or found out that he had it 2 or 3 years ago, I believe it is now. And this is tough because he was the player of the year last year for MPO. He won 4 events. He was, the Pro Tour champion as well at the end of the year. And it's scary, man. I really feel for him because it just seems like this is something that he will continue to deal with for the rest of his life. And it seems like he's a guy who's trying his best to take care of himself as far as like his diet, his fitness, how he works out, doing the cold plunges. Like he is very health focused. You can tell. And so it just stinks that he just can't seem to catch a break on being able to kind of stay away from these flare-ups. And the issue really becomes is like what happens when this starts right before a major or right before Worlds. That's the big thing that he still is trying to contend with because, he has 2 world titles. But, in recent times since those 2 Worlds, he has not performed as well as you'd expect at the other majors he's competed in, unlike a Paul who continues to be consistent in every major. And it's just one of those things, man, where I really hope that somehow something can be figured out because I just feel so bad for the guy that he can't get out there and compete. He's been shelved this year. He's, again, the player of the year from last year. He hasn't even gotten to compete yet this year due to injury, really. So, he had to pull out the All-Star weekend even and hasn't competed since and not sure when he will compete at this point. So that's really, really tough, and I really wish him the best on that. And it is what it is. And that's all I can really say as far as Waco's concerned. We got the Open at Austin coming up. We got more events on the horizon after that, and we'll continue to talk about those events as they come. Other than that, there really isn't much else to talk about, in my opinion. There's really no updates on the Gannon Burr lawsuit situation, so we're still kind of waiting to hear how that's going to go. I know that apparently, like, the hearing for that kind of got moved back, and I think he even got a new lawyer now, and so his legal team has changed, and so there's been like a couple of things like that, but nothing like definitive yet on that front, so still kind of waiting to hear about that. There was also some business news where I know Dynamic Disc wound up getting bought out by the parent company that owns Latitude 64, so it kind of just brings the Trilogy relationship even closer, because now Westside Latitude, Dynamic, the company that makes Disc Golf Valley, and like one other like retailer I think in Sweden are now all underneath that. I think it's House of Disc, like umbrella company. So there was like some business news like that had happened this past week, but nothing that really I think impacts the community at large much. Like that's just more of like an inner business thing. So I didn't really want to talk about that too much, to be honest. Kind of out of my wheelhouse as far as business stuff goes. But yeah, that's really about it for this episode of Let's Talk Disc Golf. Hope you enjoyed it. Again, if you have any questions that you'd like me to answer in the next episode, alongside just doing event coverage and news coverage stuff, please do post in the comments below any questions, and I'd be more than happy to answer them. Also, please follow and subscribe for future content. Always trying to grow the channel. We're, nearing that 1,000 subscribers mark, and so really chasing after that. Hopefully, I'll have some more practice round and tournament content coming out on this channel soon, and If you have any ideas for some other content you'd like to see, also put that in the comments below. So yeah, hope you enjoyed it. Catch you next time.